If you watched the show yesterday, you'll be familiar by now with what's happened in Germany there, the rise of the AfD. It came first place in one state, it's a very, very close second in another, and there's been so much commentary and kind of drilling down into this and the potential ramifications. There's lots of suggestions that this so-called wave of what people call populism that's sweeping Europe, because it's not just in Germany, many people suggesting that actually this is going to have an impact on UK politics for a few reasons. Perhaps the direction of travel that the Tory party need to go into, whether or not it's going to alter the rhetoric from Keir Starmer and some of the policy decisions that he goes on to make. What do you think?
Well, I think it is, because national populism as a movement is attracting people who are utterly fed up with what we might call...
Can you explain? I mean, you are a professor of this stuff, so if anyone's sitting at home going, what is national populism, Michelle? Can you just tell them?
So I actually wrote a book called National Populism.
Oh, did you? Oh,
you can get it from all good bookstores. It's on Amazon.
Give me the quick version.
So we define national populism as a movement that prioritises the interests and the values of the majority group against an elite that it argues is corrupting the country, is neglectful, is not responding to the people. And the interesting thing about what's happening in Germany, the AfD, the alternative for Germany, like what happened in France with Marine Le Pen, the Netherlands with Geert Wilders, the US with Donald Trump, the UK, arguably, with the Reform Party, although there are differences between these movements, is that what we're seeing are rising numbers of people, including, by the way, lots of young people. The AfD in Germany was the most popular party among young people, saying we've had enough of uncontrolled immigration, we've had enough of broken borders, we've had enough of Islamist terrorism. Remember, these elections came in the aftermath of those horrific mass stabbings in Germany. And what's also really profound, I think, Michelle, is already the mainstream are changing. We've got mainstream politicians in Germany saying, right, they've actually deported Afghan and Syrian criminals out of Germany. The centre-right is saying we want a blanket ban now on some illegal migrants. I think what these parties are going to end up doing, and I've been watching them for 20 years, they're going to end up pushing the entire system further to the right on this immigration question because elites have not been listening to voters on this issue.
Yeah, and I mean, I think what's interesting, what you talk about in Germany when you're talking about them deporting, the rhetoric is very tough. So what they're saying is, yeah, we've deported these criminals back to Afghan. I mean, it's only about 28 of them, and they've had to make these payments of about €1,000 to these people as well. So the rhetoric's there, and they're trying to kind of appeal to people. But if anyone's got a couple of brain cells, once you start kind of scratching beneath the surface of that, it doesn't really all stack up to some people. But anyway, Juditha, what do you think?
That's the point I was actually just going to start with, where what you've got is a sentiment that exists that is justified amongst a large portion of the people. And what you need is somebody who's kind of going to be a lightning rod that's going to speak to how they feel. But how is that going to translate into actually effective governance or power? That's a different discussion. So what you have with these parties like the Brothers of Italy or the National Rally and so on, some parties which have roots in fascism, you will always find with politics that the leaders, to be effective to gain power, you have to fluctuate. You play to one side to galvanize the party, you play to another side to galvanize the people. Any effective leader, whether you are left or right, at some point, it's almost like what Biden said when he won the election against Trump. He said, even though I represent one party, I'm going to be a president of all people. To do that, you must gravitate towards the centre because it shows you're effectively being pragmatic enough to recognise the sentiments of all people. You do not play to just one party because the country isn't populated by people who only support one party. So saying that, oh, you want someone who's going to be a leader that only represents you, that's not how leadership works. Leadership is universal. So to be practical and to function properly, you have to have a universality in your approach.
And what do you think about this notion then, where you've just been explaining about the wants, needs, desires or whatever of the majority group, and sometimes that is chipped away, chipped away, chipped away. And it seems to be that every single minority group in the entire land, the needs and wants and desires of that group is prioritised over the main majority. What would you say to that? Do you think there's any truth in that sentiment?
I don't think that it's being prioritised. What's happening is the sentiment you have, it has to be pointed enough to be practically resolved. Because what you'll have is, most like the average person, I'll say how I feel about something, but how can I make change happen where I'm not working to a point that alienates everyone else to my pleasure? Like they say, your convenience stops where the next person's inconvenience begins. I do agree that the right has a problem, because what you have is you're creating this further within the extreme right sentiment, and the centrists are not doing what is necessary to say we're listening and we're adapting to accommodate. But as far as the left goes, what you've seen even in Germany or with Marine Le Pen, when it gets to a point where they feel you are a threat, they say the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The rest will rally around to mount a defense against you. It may not be effective long term, but what they're showing is that when you act a certain way that is so alienating of so many other people, all those others will work together to fight against you.
Can I just come in briefly? Because I think sometimes when we talk about these policy issues, we're led to believe they're minority positions. But, you know, if you look at the UK as an example, you know, we had polling by YouGov this week that shows 67% of Brits want to increase the deportation of illegal migrants out of the country. We've got 2/3 of the country saying immigration has been too high over the last decade. We've got record low numbers of people feeling as though immigration overall has been good for Britain's economy, public services, and the NHS and so on. And I think what we're seeing here is basically an elite class that has radicalised over the last 15 years, has basically defined itself through its liberal values, its liberal views. It likes to say nice things about immigration. It likes to be openly liberal because it wins more status points among other members of the elites because they don't really have to live with the consequences of these decisions. I mean, if you are, you know, belonging to, you know, the political class, chances are your life's pretty good and you're not really going to suffer the consequences of some of these disastrous policy decisions. But most of these parties are tapping into views that are held by large majorities of people in Europe. And the elite find this really threatening. They find it uncomfortable, which is why they instinctively then rush to censorship as an answer. So you see Keir Starmer saying, well, let's narrow this marketplace of ideas. Let's shut down this public square. Let's have, you know, non-hateful...
non-crime
hate incidents. Let's have legal but harmful speech. Let's control the conversation. And many people are saying, well, actually, what we want are just, you know, we want lower levels of immigration, we want strong borders, and we want foreign nationals removed from the country. Like, we've had a discussion about prisons over the last 3 weeks. Here's one thing we haven't discussed. We've got 10,000 foreign nationals in our prisons. Why don't we remove those folks from the prison so we can have some more space for actual criminals and keep actual criminals in prison?
I just find it so peculiar that so many governments, it seems like globally, this is a global issue, point blank refuse to acknowledge people's concerns on this core topic for so many people. And anyone that watches my show regularly, you'll hear me repeat this saying all the time. But I believe that censorship is the midwife of extremism. So when you censor people's, what I would argue, legitimate concerns, you don't make those concerns disappear. People don't wake up one day and say, well, Keir Starmer's told me I can't think that, so I better not think it. Those concerns don't go away. What happens is you bury them and bury them and bury them. People go, well, maybe I shouldn't say that. Some voice pops up over here that then starts reflecting your thoughts, albeit perhaps a bit more extreme than you started off. And then you start gravitating. So you do find yourself pulled to more extreme positions, which it should never have been the case, because legitimate concerns, particularly around safety, Judita, we talk about this often. If you live in, say, I don't know, Hartlepool, where you've just seen that this random dog walker was killed by someone who shouldn't have even been in the country in the first place, you're going to therefore potentially be concerned about, well, are we safe here? You know, what safety checks have been done on people, you know, so on and so forth. But you're not even allowed to say that anymore, potentially.
No, I completely agree that there are certain things that I don't even understand how to wrap my head around the way political leaders are approaching it, because it seems so counterproductive. There are justified concerns around safety. There are justified concerns around immigration. But what you have is that certain voices representing that point of view use a mode of articulation that is antagonistic and too combative. Just how you articulated yourself just then makes complete sense. It's clear. It's pointed. These are where the problems lie. This is what you should address. Most people who are riling up sentiment don't speak the way you do. And so a perception is projected. It's kind of like what they say about minority groups. The people who shout the loudest tend to be the most extreme and give a perception that that's how everyone else feels when they don't. If you speak to a lot of ethnic minorities, they think the same way and say, I feel unsafe here.
That's true.
I am worried about this. Immigration troubles me there because I've said there are different kinds of immigration. immigration. Students who come here, skilled workers who come here, come for a purpose, do a job, earn a wage, pay a tax. Many of them intend to retire and go back home, look after their elderly families. There is a trajectory for their existence here. It's not all immigration, but what you'll have is people putting out a clarion call that immigration is wrong, and then the rest of people hear that and go, wait, that doesn't apply to me. You've created enemies instantly. Be pointed in your rhetoric around where your discontent lies, and you'll have a more productive move towards change.